The heavy, metallic whine of a spaceship's atmospheric entry filled the cramped confines of the Talon, a patchwork freighter that seemed one bad landing away from disintegration. The vessel streaked through the skies of Veltrix for a lush but foreboding planet renowned for its dense jungles and carnivorous wildlife. Inside the cockpit, Leora Valen, a whip-smart xenologist, and Trek Varn, a grizzled mercenary with a prosthetic arm, stared at the rapidly approaching surface. "Why does it feel like we're about to drop into an oven full of teeth?" Trek muttered, his cybernetic hand twitching in rhythm with his unease. "Because Veltrix has 83 species of apex predators," Leora replied, tightening her harness. "And that's just on land. Relax, they're not interested in you." "Comforting," Trek grumbled. "How do you always get me into this mess?" "It's not a mess. It's a mission," Leora said with a grin. "And you're the one who signed up for the paycheck." Their conversation halted as the ship jostled violently, plunging through the thick, green canopy and landing with a loud crash. Steam hissed from ruptured pipes, and a cascade of sparks illuminated the cockpit. "Perfect landing," Leora exclaimed, unbuckling herself. Trek shot her a glare. "You're insane." Veltrix wasn't just any planet. It was the last known location of the Svelner Collective, a once powerful alien species that had mysteriously vanished centuries ago. Rumors suggested the Svelner weren't wiped out by disease or war, but by an entirely different phenomenon: their over-reliance on their advanced robotic army. The idea fascinated Leora, whose research focused on species adapting, or failing to adapt, to emerging technologies. The mission was supposed to be a simple in-and-out operation: document evidence of the Svelner's fabled downfall, snag a few artifacts, and leave before the local wildlife turned them into a buffet. But as they stepped outside into the thick, humid air, it became clear their journey would be anything but simple. The jungle was alive, pulsing with sounds of alien life. Vivid plants with bioluminescent tendrils seemed to watch as the pair moved cautiously. Trek carried a plasma rifle, his cybernetic arm ready to punch through anything that got too close, while Leora carried an all-purpose scanner slung across her back. "Anything on the scanners?" Trek asked as he scanned the area. Leora's device beeped erratically. "The ruins are close, maybe half a kilometer north. But I'm picking up energy signatures that shouldn't be here. Could be dormant Svelner tech." Trek frowned. "Dormant? Like, waiting to kill us dormant?" "Possibly." "Great," he muttered. "Should have brought more ammo." The pair trekked deeper into the jungle, battling vines that seemed to grab at their legs. Trek's prosthetic arm came in handy as he hacked away at the foliage, while Leora marveled at the alien flora. They finally stumbled upon the ruins: massive, angular structures made of iridescent stone that shimmered in the dim jungle light. At the center of the ruins stood a towering obelisk, its surface etched with intricate, glowing runes. A faint hum emanated from the structure, sending shivers down Leora's spine. "This is it," Leora whispered, her eyes wide. "The heart of the Svelner's civilization." Before Trek could reply, a high-pitched whirring sound filled the air. From the shadows, 3 humanoid robots emerged, their sleek forms gleaming. Their red, unblinking eyes locked onto the intruders. "Robots," Trek said, raising his rifle. "Why is it always robots?" The machines moved with eerie precision, advancing silently. Trek opened fire, his plasma rifle lighting up the ruins. One of the robots exploded in a shower of sparks, but the other 2 dodged with inhuman speed. Leora frantically tapped her scanner. "They're guarding the obelisk. I think it's still operational." "Tell that to them," Trek yelled, narrowly avoiding a swipe from a razor-sharp appendage. He fired again, taking down another robot. The last machine lunged at Leora, its blade-like arms glinting in the light. She stumbled backward, dropping her scanner. Trek tackled the robot midair, his prosthetic arm crushing its torso. The machine twitched, then went still. "Close one," Trek said, panting. "You good?" "Fine," Leora replied, retrieving her scanner. "But this changes everything. If the robots are still active, it means the Svelner tech isn't just dormant, It's self-sustaining? Fantastic. Let's grab what we need and get out before more show up. As they approached the obelisk, Leora's scanner went wild, its readings spiking off the charts. She placed her hand on the surface of the structure, feeling its faint warmth. "This isn't just a monument," she said, her voice trembling. "It's a control hub." The Svelner used it to command their robotic army. Trek glanced at the jungle around them, suddenly feeling exposed. And now we're standing in the middle of their command center. What could possibly go wrong? The obelisk began to vibrate. A low, resonant tone echoed through the ruins, and the runes pulsed with increasing intensity. "You just had to touch it, didn't you?" Trek said, backing away. Leora ignored him, her mind racing. "It's responding to my biometrics. It must think I'm one of the Svelner. If I can interface with it, we might learn what happened to them. Or it'll decide we're intruders and fry us." Before they could decide their next move, a loud rumble shook the ground. From the jungle, dozens of robotic figures emerged, their eyes glowing with malevolent red light. Unlike the earlier models, these were larger, more menacing, armed with weaponry that looked far deadlier than Trek's rifle. "Time to run," Trek said, pulling Leora back toward the jungle. But the robots didn't fire. Instead, they surrounded the obelisk, forming a protective barrier. Their posture was almost reverent, as though the structure were sacred. Leora's breath caught. "They're not attacking. They think I'm in command." Trek stared at her, incredulous. "You? Commanding an army of killer robots?" "Not killer. Defensive," Leora corrected, though her voice betrayed her uncertainty. "If I can figure out how to communicate with them, maybe we can turn this situation to our advantage." Trek's cybernetic hand flexed nervously. "Or they figure out you're a fraud, and we're toast." The obelisk emitted another pulse, this one brighter and more intense. The runes shifted, forming new patterns that Leora struggled to decipher. Her scanner beeped furiously, displaying lines of alien script. "This could be their language," she murmured, engrossed. Trek groaned. "You're gonna get us killed. Just say hi and see what happens." Swallowing her fear, Leora stepped closer to the obelisk. "If you can understand me, I come in peace. I seek knowledge of the Svelner and your purpose here." For a moment, nothing happened. Then the obelisk's hum deepened, and the surrounding robots stood straighter, their red eyes dimming to a softer hue. Trek lowered his rifle slightly. "Is that good?" "I think so," Leora replied, though she sounded far from certain. As the robot's eyes continued to dim, a deep, mechanical voice emanated from the obelisk. "Identity, unrecognized. Purpose, query invalid. Authorization, pending." Leora frowned. "It doesn't fully recognize me, but it's not rejecting us either." "Yet," Trek added. The obelisk pulsed again, and the robots turned their heads toward the jungle. A guttural roar echoed through the air, followed by the sound of crashing foliage. Something massive was approaching. Leora and Trek exchanged a glance. "Let me guess," Trek said, his grip tightening on his rifle. "Not friendly." "Definitely not," Leora replied, backing away from the obelisk. "But if the robots aren't attacking us, maybe they'll defend us." The pair braced themselves as the roar grew louder, signaling the arrival of a new, unknown threat. The guttural roar intensified, shaking the ruins with its ferocity. Trees toppled like matchsticks, their crashing thuds reverberating through the jungle. Leora and Trek barely had time to react before a massive beast emerged into the clearing. It was unlike anything either of them had seen before, an amalgamation of sinewy muscle and jagged armor plating that shimmered like liquid metal. Its four glowing eyes burned with an intelligence that felt far more dangerous than raw ferocity, and its maw, filled with rows of serrated teeth, dripped with a luminous green substance that sizzled against the ground. "Tell me that's a herbivore," Trek muttered, aiming his rifle. Leora shook her head, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not even close. That's a Veltrix apex. The most dangerous predator on this planet." The creature bellowed again, the sound deafening. The robotic sentinels surrounding the obelisk moved in unison, forming a defensive line. Their once menacing red eyes were now focused entirely on the beast, as if analyzing the threat. "Good news," Trek said, taking a cautious step back. "Looks like they're on our side." "Don't count on it," Leora warned. "Their priority might be protecting the obelisk, not us." The apex charged, its massive claws tearing into the ground with terrifying speed. The robots responded in kind, their sleek forms darting forward with mechanical precision. Plasma bolts fired from their built-in weapons, sizzling through the air and striking the beast's armored hide. But the apex was no ordinary predator. It shrugged off the attacks like mosquito bites, swatting one of the robots with a single blow. The machine crumpled into a heap of twisted metal, sparks flying as its systems failed. "We need to move," Trek shouted, grabbing Leora's arm. "If that thing gets past the robots, we're done for." "But this is an incredible opportunity," Leora protested, her eyes glued to the unfolding battle. "We're witnessing the ultimate clash between organic and synthetic life. Think of the data. Think of surviving." Trek snapped, dragging her toward the jungle. "You can't study anything if you're dead." The jungle loomed around them as they sprinted away from the ruins. Behind them, the battle raged on, the sounds of metal clashing against flesh echoing through the trees. Leora's mind raced as fast as her legs, trying to process the implications of what she'd just witnessed. The Svelner robots were incredibly advanced, yet even they were struggling to contain the apex. It was a chilling reminder of why the Svelner's reliance on technology might have been their downfall. What if their robotic army had simply been outclassed by a force of nature? Their flight was cut short when another rumble shook the ground, this one closer than before. Trek stopped abruptly, his cybernetic arm raised defensively. "What now?" he growled. From the underbrush, a second apex emerged. This one was smaller but no less imposing, its eyes glowing the same ominous green as the first. It snarled, advancing toward them with predatory intent. "Why is there always a backup monster?" Trek muttered, raising his rifle. Leora frantically tapped at her scanner, searching for anything that could give them an edge. "The smaller one might be a juvenile. Maybe we can scare it off." Trek raised an eyebrow. "Scare it off? With what?" "Harsh language." Before she could answer, the juvenile apex lunged. Trek fired a plasma bolt straight into its chest, the blast knocking it backward, but leaving it largely unscathed. The creature roared, enraged, and charged again. "Bad idea," Trek shouted, dodging its swipe. His prosthetic arm slammed into the creature's side, the metal making a sickening crunch against its armored hide. It staggered, giving them a brief moment to regroup. "Run," Trek yelled. "I'll hold it off." "I'm not leaving you," Leora shot back, her voice trembling but resolute. Trek gritted his teeth, blocking another swipe from the creature with his arm. Heroic. Stupid, but heroic. Before the apex could attack again, a sudden burst of light filled the clearing. One of the Svelner robots appeared, its glowing eyes fixed on the juvenile apex. It emitted a high-pitched tone that made the creature pause, its movements suddenly jerky and uncoordinated. "What's it doing?" Leora asked, staring in awe. "Don't care," Trek replied. "Just glad it's not trying to kill us." The robot stepped forward, emitting another tone. The juvenile apex whimpered, its aggression seemingly drained. It turned and bolted into the jungle, disappearing into the shadows. Trek lowered his rifle, panting. "I'm gonna pretend that made sense." Leora approached the robot cautiously, her scanner still beeping. It must have emitted a frequency that disrupted the apex's nervous system. The Svelner really did design these machines to handle anything. "Yeah, except the big one back there," Trek pointed out, jerking his thumb toward the ruins. As if on cue, a distant explosion rocked the jungle. Smoke billowed above the treetops, and the faint hum of the obelisk grew louder, its tone now frantic and irregular. "They're losing," Leora said, her voice heavy with dread. "If that apex destroys the obelisk, we'll lose any chance of understanding the Svelner, and we'll probably be next on its menu." Trek sighed, reloading his rifle. "Why do I get the feeling you have a terrible plan?" Leora's eyes lit up with a mixture of fear and determination. The robots are connected to the obelisk. If I can interface with it, I might be able to redirect the entire network's focus. And by redirect, you mean? Use the robots to neutralize the apex, she said, her voice firm. All of them. Trek stared at her like she'd grown a second head. You're insane. Maybe, Leora admitted. But it's our best shot. With no time to argue, they sprinted back toward the ruins. The battle was a chaotic blur of sparks and blood. The apex towered over the remaining robots, its metallic hide dented but far from defeated. Each swipe of its claws sent another machine crashing to the ground. Leora darted toward the obelisk, dodging falling debris. Trek covered her, firing at the apex whenever it got too close. She reached the structure and placed her hand on its surface, her scanner working overtime to decode the alien language. "Come on," she muttered. "Work with me here." The obelisk hummed in response, its runes shifting rapidly. A flood of alien data poured into her scanner, nearly overwhelming her. She gritted her teeth, focusing on the patterns. Slowly, she began to understand. "I've got it," she yelled. "I can reprogram the robots to attack as one, then do it fast." Trek shouted, narrowly avoiding a swipe from the apex. Leora's fingers flew across her scanner, inputting commands. The obelisk's glow intensified, and the remaining robots froze for a moment before turning in unison to face the apex. The tide of the battle shifted instantly. The robots moved as a single unit, their attacks coordinated and relentless. Plasma bolts struck the apex in its vulnerable joints, forcing it to retreat. One robot launched itself onto the creature's back, stabbing into its armored hide with a glowing blade. The apex roared in fury, but it was no match for the swarm of machines. With one final, desperate lunge, it collapsed to the ground, its body heaving before going still. Leora stumbled away from the obelisk, her legs trembling. Trek caught her before she fell. "Nice work, genius," he said with a smirk. "Remind me never to doubt you again." She smiled weakly. "I'll hold you to that." As the jungle fell eerily silent, the robots returned to their positions around the obelisk, their eyes dimming to a neutral blue. The battle was over, but the implications of what they'd witnessed were just beginning to sink in. "You think the Spellner lost control of these things?" Trek asked, glancing at the obelisk. "Maybe," Leora replied. "Or maybe they underestimated the cost of relying on them. Either way, we're lucky to be alive." "Luck had nothing to do with it," Trek said, clapping her on the shoulder. "You're a survivor. Just don't drag me into another death trap, okay?" Leora chuckled. "No promises." As they made their way back to the Talon, the obelisk pulsed one final time, its glow fading as if to bid them farewell. The victory against the apex provided only fleeting relief. The air around the obelisk was thick with tension as the remaining robots resumed their silent vigil. Trek paced in small circles near the jungle's edge, plasma rifle in hand, while Leora leaned against the obelisk, staring at her scanner. Something wasn't right. "You're too quiet," Trek said, his tone accusatory. "That means you're either planning something stupid, or you've just realized we're in deeper trouble than I thought." Leora glanced at him, her expression grim. "Both." "Of course," Trek muttered, slinging his rifle over his shoulder. "Let's hear it." Leora pointed to the obelisk's shifting runes. "The energy readings haven't stabilized. The obelisk is still in some sort of reactive state. I think when I used it to control the robots, I triggered a failsafe." "A failsafe for what?" Trek asked, already regretting the question. "To protect itself," Leora replied. "The obelisk isn't just a command hub. It's the centerpiece of a network spanning the entire planet. If it thinks it's under threat, it might explode, summon more killer robots, open a portal to robot hell." Trek interrupted, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Leora shot him a look. "It might activate every dormant Spellner construct on Veltrix 4. If that happens, the jungle and anything in it could be wiped out in a matter of hours." Trek let out a low whistle. "That's spectacularly bad. How do we stop it?" "We stabilize the system," Leora said, her fingers flying across her scanner. There has to be a way to calm the network before it fully activates. But I'll need access to one of the auxiliary control nodes. And where's that? Leora pointed toward a jagged mountain peak visible in the distance, its summit wreathed in dark clouds.
There.
Trek squinted at the ominous silhouette.
Of course it's on top of a death mountain.
Why wouldn't it be? As if to punctuate his sarcasm, the ground trembled beneath their feet. A deep, mechanical rumble echoed through the jungle, and faint, flickering lights appeared in the distance. The network's waking up, Leora said, her voice tight. We don't have much time. Without further argument, they set off toward the mountain. The journey was grueling. The jungle's dense foliage gave way to rocky terrain, and the temperature dropped as they climbed higher. Despite the urgency, they couldn't move too fast. Strange, spindly machines stirred in the shadows, their glowing eyes following the intruders with predatory curiosity. I don't like being watched, Trek muttered, his grip on his rifle tightening. They're not attacking, Leora observed, her voice strained from the climb.
Yet.
Your optimism is touching. As they ascended, the terrain grew more treacherous. Loose rocks threatened to send them tumbling with every step, and the thin air made it hard to breathe. Trek's cybernetic arm proved invaluable, helping him haul Leora over steep ledges. Despite his grumbling, he never hesitated to lend a hand. By the time they reached the auxiliary node, they were both exhausted. The structure was embedded into the mountainside, a massive, circular door surrounded by glowing runes. Unlike the obelisk, this node emitted a low, steady hum, as if it were waiting. Looks welcoming, Trek said, eyeing the runes warily. What's the plans? Leora examined the runes, her scanner buzzing with activity. I'll need to interface with the node directly. It should let me access the network's core functions. And what am I doing while you're playing galactic IT technician? Keeping me alive, Leora said simply. Trek sighed, positioning himself near the entrance. Figures. Leora placed her hand on the node's surface. The runes flared to life, and the door began to open with a deep, resonant groan. Beyond the threshold lay a cavernous chamber filled with alien machinery. Thin beams of light crisscrossed the space, illuminating a central console surrounded by pulsing conduits. As Leora approached the console, the air grew heavy with static. Her scanner beeped furiously, displaying lines of alien code that scrolled too fast to read. This is incredible, she whispered. It's like the entire network is alive. Focus on incredible later, Trek said, scanning the chamber. I don't trust quiet places like this. Leora worked quickly, her fingers flying across the console's surface. She tapped into the network, her scanner displaying an intricate web of connections stretching across the planet. The central obelisk pulsed angrily in the holographic display, its energy levels dangerously unstable. I can see the fault, she said, her voice filled with urgency. The network's trying to repair itself, but the system's too fragmented. I need to isolate the obelisk's functions before it overloads. And how long does that take? Longer if you keep interrupting me, Leora shot back. Before Trek could retort, a deep, mechanical growl echoed through the chamber. He spun around, his rifle raised. From the shadows, 3 towering constructs emerged. Unlike the robots at the ruins, these machines were bulkier, their forms bristling with weaponry. Friends of yours? Trek asked. Leora didn't look up. Not mine.
Buy me some time.
Trek fired without hesitation. Plasma bolts struck the first construct, scorching its metallic hide but barely slowing its advance. The second machine raised an arm, launching a volley of glowing projectiles that exploded against the walls, sending shards of metal flying. Little busy here, Trek shouted, dodging another blast. I'm almost there, Leora replied, her voice strained. The third construct charged at Trek, its heavy footfalls shaking the ground. He dove out of the way, his cybernetic arm lashing out and smashing into the machine's leg. It stumbled, giving him a brief opening to fire a concentrated blast into its exposed joint. The construct collapsed with a satisfying crash. One down, Trek muttered, turning to face the other two. Leora's hands moved frantically over the console. The network's holographic display pulsed erratically, and warning symbols filled her scanner screen. Sweat beaded on her forehead as she fought to stabilize the system. "Got it," she cried, her voice triumphant. "I've isolated the obelisk." "Great," Trek said, firing another shot. "Now get us out of here." Before Leora could respond, the chamber shook violently. The remaining constructs faltered, their movements glitchy and uncoordinated. A deafening roar echoed through the mountain as the central console emitted a blinding flash of light. When the light faded, the constructs were motionless, their eyes dark. The chamber was eerily silent once more. Leora slumped against the console, breathing heavily. The network stabilized. "The obelisk won't overload." Trek helped her to her feet, his expression a mix of relief and exasperation. "You know, for a scientist, you've got a real knack for attracting trouble." She smiled weakly. "And for surviving it." As they exited the node, the first rays of dawn broke through the clouds, casting the jungle below in a golden light. For the first time, the planet felt peaceful. "So," Trek said as they began their descent. "What's next? Another death trap? More killer robots?" Leora laughed, her spirits lifted. "Let's just get off this planet first." "Best idea you've had all day," Trek replied. Together, they made their way back toward the Talon, leaving the mysteries of the Spellner and their deadly creations behind them. The hike back to the Talon was eerily calm, the jungle's vibrant chaos now subdued, as if the planet itself had momentarily held its breath. The obelisk in the distance had stopped pulsing, its once vivid glow dimmed to a gentle, rhythmic hum. Leora and Trek moved carefully through the underbrush, both painfully aware that peace on Beltrix rarely lasted long. "How much time do you think we have before this place wakes up again?" Trek asked, his voice low. Leora checked her scanner, her brow furrowed in concentration. The network stabilized, but it's fragile. Any sudden interference could reactivate the constructs. "We need to get off this planet before someone or something triggers it." Trek glanced at the surrounding jungle, his rifle ready. "Let's hope nobody else is dumb enough to come here." As they neared the clearing where the Talon had crash-landed, Trek froze, raising a hand to signal Leora to stop. "Something's wrong," he whispered. Leora followed his gaze. The Talon was no longer alone. A sleek, black ship hovered nearby, its reflective surface almost invisible against the jungle canopy. Several figures in armored exosuits were milling around the freighter, their movements precise and military. "Scavengers?" Leora whispered. "Worse," Trek replied, his jaw tightening. "Corporate security. Probably here for the same thing we were." Leora's heart sank. She recognized the logo emblazoned on the exosuits. Kovix Industries, a powerful conglomerate known for exploiting alien technology without regard for consequences. If they gained control of the Spellner network, the results could be catastrophic. "They can't activate the obelisk," she said urgently. "They don't know what they're dealing with." "That's assuming they haven't already," Trek muttered. "What's the play?" Leora hesitated. "We can't let them leave with any data. Or worse, wake the network." "And how do you suggest we stop them?" "Politely ask them to go home." Before she could respond, a sharp, mechanical whirring sound echoed from the jungle. Leora's blood ran cold as she recognized the source, one of the Spellner constructs, reawakened by the intrusion. The armored figures froze, their weapons drawn, as the construct burst into the clearing. It was larger than the ones they'd encountered earlier, its segmented body bristling with deadly appendages. Its glowing eyes scanned the intruders, locking onto the Kovix team. "Well, there's our distraction," Trek said grimly. "Let's move." While the construct engaged the Kovix team, Leora and Trek skirted the edge of the clearing, moving as quietly as possible. The sounds of battle intensified as plasma bolts lit up the darkened jungle. The Kovix soldiers fought with brutal efficiency, their exosuits granting them enhanced strength and agility. But the construct was relentless, its attacks tearing through their ranks. "How long do you think that thing will keep them busy?" Trek asked. "Not long enough," Leora replied. We need to disable their ship before they can call for reinforcements. They reached the Talon, using its bulk as cover while they assessed the Kovik's vessel. It was heavily armed, with automated turrets that scanned the perimeter. Leora's mind raced as she searched for a weakness. "Do you still have that EMP grenade?" she asked. Trek patted his belt, producing a small, cylindrical device. "One left." "You thinking what I'm thinking? If we can disable the ship systems, they'll have no way to escape, or call for backup. And we'll have about 10 seconds before they figure out it was us," Trek pointed out. "Then let's make it count," Leora said. Trek nodded, activating the grenade's timer. With a practiced motion, he lobbed it toward the Kovik's vessel. The grenade landed with a metallic clang near one of the landing struts, its blinking light barely noticeable in the chaos. The EMP detonated with a sharp burst of light and sound. The ship's lights flickered and died, and the automated turrets fell silent. The Kovik soldiers, still locked in combat with the construct, shouted in alarm as their comms and targeting systems went offline. "Move," Trek hissed, pulling Leora toward the Talon. They climbed into the freighter's cockpit, where Trek immediately began flipping switches and muttering curses under his breath. The Talon groaned in protest, but its systems slowly came to life. "We're not exactly flight-ready," Trek said, glancing at the cracked instrument panel. "But we can limp out of here. Just get us airborne," Leora said, strapping herself into the co-pilot's seat. The Talon shuddered as its engines roared to life. Outside, the Kovik's team had regrouped, their attention now divided between the construct and the escaping freighter. Plasma bolts pinged off the Talon's hull as Trek wrestled the ship into the air. "Hold on," he shouted. The freighter lurched skyward, its damaged thrusters sputtering under the strain. Leora clung to her seat, her eyes fixed on the obelisk shrinking in the distance. The construct was still wreaking havoc below, its relentless assault keeping the Kovik's team pinned down. As they broke through the canopy, the Kovik's vessel remained grounded, its systems still offline. Leora allowed herself a small sigh of relief, though her hands trembled from the adrenaline. "We're not out of the woods yet," Trek warned, glancing at the sensor display. "That EMP didn't do anything permanent. If they fix their ship, they'll come after us. Then we'll make sure they can't," Leora said, her voice steady despite the chaos. "Set a course for orbit." "I have an idea." Trek gave her a wary look but complied, guiding the Talon into the upper atmosphere. As the planet's surface fell away, Leora worked furiously at her console, accessing the Svelner data she'd downloaded from the obelisk. "What are you doing?" Trek asked. "Activating the network's final failsafe," Leora replied. The Svelner didn't just design their constructs to protect their technology, they designed them to destroy it if it fell into the wrong hands. Trek's eyes widened. "You're going to blow the obelisk." "Not just the obelisk," Leora said. "The entire network." Trek stared at her, torn between disbelief and reluctant admiration. "You're really willing to wipe out centuries of knowledge?" "If it means keeping it out of Kovik's hands, yes," Leora said firmly. The Svelner's technology was their downfall. "We can't let history repeat itself." Trek nodded slowly. "Do it." Leora input the final command, her hands steady despite the weight of the decision. A low hum emanated from the console as the failsafe activated. On the planet below, the obelisk's glow intensified, spreading outward in a cascade of light that engulfed the ruins. The Kovik's vessel, still grounded, was caught in the blast. Its sleek frame crumpled under the force, consumed by the cascading energy. The construct, too, disintegrated, its form reduced to ash as the failsafe completed its work. From orbit, the destruction was almost beautiful, a silent bloom of light that faded as quickly as it had appeared. Veltrix, for returned to darkness, its secrets buried once more. Leora leaned back in her seat, her exhaustion finally catching up with her. "It's done." Trek glanced at her, a hint of respect in his smirk. "You just destroyed a planet's worth of ancient tech. And I thought I had a flair for the dramatic." She chuckled weakly. "Let's just call it a necessary evil." As the Talon drifted into open space, the enormity of their actions settled over them. They had survived Veltrix 4, but the weight of its legacy would stay with them forever. So, Trek said, breaking the silence. What's next? More robots? Killer plants? A nice, relaxing beach? Leora smiled faintly. Let's just start with survival. The stars stretched before them, vast and endless, as the Talon disappeared into the void.